Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics.
Hi, welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Dianna Dini.
And this is Fred Schenkelberg. Hey, Dianna.
Hey, Dianna. Thanks for having me. Reliability is a passion of mine, so I'm excited to be here.
Who is that?
This is my friend G.
Oh, hi, G.
Oops, you're right. This is G, everyone. It's great to be here.
Well, welcome to the conversation. So, Dianna, I believe G is on your end of the country at the moment, but you invited a guest, so we don't do that very often. So this must be a special guest.
Yes, G is a special guest. She's actually talking through my phone through the program Gemini, which is Google's artificial intelligence. So I prepared G with a little bit about the podcast and her role in what this was supposed to be, and just asked her to be part of the conversation.
Cool. Well, welcome, G, and glad to have you on board.
That's really cool, Dianna. I'm glad you decided to bring me along. So, Fred, Dianna, are y'all talking about a specific reliability challenge or just kicking things off in general?
Well, a little bit of both. I'm thinking that one of the common things we do in reliability engineering is troubleshooting a failure of some sort. Are you familiar with the 8 disciplines method?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the 8D method. It's a classic problem-solving tool that breaks down troubleshooting into manageable steps. I'm curious, have you found that 8D works well for all kinds of reliability issues? Or are there times when you reach for a different approach?
Well, good question. It depends on the issue. If I'm doing a failure analysis, let's say a dishwasher is broken in my kitchen and won't start, the 8D process is a good way to approach it. But if I know that it's not plugged in, I just plug it in. It's a different approach at some point.
That makes sense. The 8D method is great for those complex issues where the root cause isn't obvious. But for something simple like a power cord, you definitely want to start with the easy checks first. Saves a lot of time. You mentioned failure analysis. That sounds like a deep dive into why something failed, right?
That's right. So, Dianna, one question I would like to ask you about too is that I know you've done the 8D process on occasion. Which part do you think is the most difficult? Or should we let G take an approach at that first?
It's like you're getting ready to ask a question.
Oh, G's having trouble keeping up, I think, with the computer speaker and me speaking.
Go ahead.
Thanks, G.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, the 8D process is for more complicated stuff. And in fact, you mentioned dishwasher. My dishwasher just recently broke.
8D process is perfect. Oh, that's no good. Any idea what happened? Maybe we can figure out if the 8D process would even be helpful in this case.
Well, I'll tell you the scenario. Here's what happened. Is that my dishwasher was leaking water all over the floor, like in 2 cups worth. So I pulled off the front and I'm looking at the bottom and I take my camera and I'm down there digging around with my camera, making things visible, taking pictures and video. And I found where it was leaking and it was dripping on an electrical box because we don't have it plugged in. We have it hardwired in. So that caused a lot of emergencies. But we decided that was the last straw and that we just wanted to get a new dishwasher. But the people at the appliance store were like, what? That's a really good brand. Why is it leaking? I really want to know the root cause. So that started a whole topic of discussion. They wanted to see the video that I produced, and they were talking to me about the brand and how long I've used it. There's regular reliability engineers at the appliance store.
Well, that's pretty cool. Did they follow the 8D process at some point, or kind of, if they were remote, it's hard to gather the team and do all those kind of things?
The 8D process is pretty structured, so it's possible they used a checklist or something similar. You could always ask them. It might give you some insights into how appliance repair shops handle troubleshooting. So, did you end up getting a new dishwasher?
I did end up getting a new dishwasher, but the people at the appliance store really just wanted me to fix what I had. I had to convince them that I wanted to buy a new one. But what they did for troubleshooting this dishwasher is they said, "Can we see the video you took?" And they took a picture of my picture with their phone and then used Google Lens to identify which part it was, and then use some search engine to identify what some of the common problems for leaking was in that model. They did a whole root cause analysis investigation in like 2 minutes based off of my feedback of the symptom and my video from my phone.
Well, one thing I've
Right.
found in
Sounds like technology came to the rescue there. So did they end up finding a way to fix the leak, or was the damage already too bad?
Well, hold on, G. Fred had a comment to say.
so one of the
Okay, Fred, go ahead. Since G is a safe and secure AI, it cannot access or use any personally identifiable information, PII. This includes financial information, health information, and other sensitive data. So it is important to be mindful of what you share.
So one of the issues with, the customer service and the way you described it, Dianna, was I see that all the time in failure analysis and troubleshooting type issues, is that just because that hose or that component or that fixture is leaking, that's not the root cause. And they skipped a handful of other steps that help us to really diagnose what it is, as to, well, what caused that? Was it poor materials? Was it poor installation? Was it vibration? Was it damage in some sort? The part that I find, and G, please comment on this, is that being able to replicate the problem and understand it fundamentally is an essential part of failure analysis. What do you think?
Absolutely. Being able to recreate a problem helps you narrow down the possibilities. It's like being a detective. You need all the clues to crack the case. So do you think the appliance store should have tried to replicate the leak somehow before suggesting parts or repairs?
Well, I do think so. And they may have a different motivation than the design team or the manufacturer would have. Mm-hmm. So let's say that information goes to the manufacturer. What questions should they ask?
You raise a good point about the different motivations. The appliance store's priority might be fixing the leak quickly, while the manufacturer cares more about the big picture and preventing future failures. It'd be interesting to hear from a manufacturer's perspective. What kind of questions do you think they'd ask?
Well, that's the question I asked you, G.
I think the manufacturers would ask questions similar to, was there a defect in the part? Having looked at the usability, because I use my dishwasher pretty heavily. I guess the standard is 2 times a week. That's when they say dishwasher lasts 10 years. But with me and my family, I'm almost embarrassed to say that we run it almost twice a day.
So that's all the good home cooking you guys are doing. So
yeah, and the work from home and the teenagers that eat all the time.
Yep, manufacturers care a lot about. You might be onto something there. Running the dishwasher so much probably put a lot more stress on the seals and gaskets. Maybe that's what caused the leak. So, what do you think? Should dishwasher manufacturers design their appliances to handle heavier use?
Well, I ended up doing some light research, not so much technical, but I went on Reddit and I asked people, what dishwasher do you like?
Sounds like you found some interesting stuff.
And
absolutely. What kind of things did you find?
Well, I found out that that brand was made by another manufacturer. And usually people have a lot of success with it, like it doesn't leak. So it kind of indicated that there's something unique with how the dishwasher is installed, or maybe my heavy use of it. But I went to a different brand that was designed a little bit differently, had some leak notification features on it, and just seemed to be more solidly built from my mechanical engineering perspective.
And so far, so good? Is it working?
It gets installed on Friday.
Oh, excellent. Well, we'll have to follow up with.
Interesting. So it sounds like the leak might have been an isolated incident, maybe something to do with the specific dishwasher or how it was installed. Switching brands seems like a good move, especially if the new one has features that address your specific needs. Switching gears a bit, you mentioned your background is in mechanical engineering. How does that influence the way you think about reliability?
Being a mechanical engineer and thinking about reliability, it sort of gets into everyday life with
Sounds
everything.
Fascinating. So you're saying that as a mechanical engineer, you bring a unique perspective to reliability. You mentioned getting to the root cause of things. Is that something you focus on a lot in your work?
I would say so. How about you, Fred? Do you focus on the root cause of things like all the time?
Not as much as Kirk does. No, he was getting in the way of his repairmen when they were out troubleshooting stuff. But some people are more at it than
Let's
others.
hear about your strategy.
So when shifting topics a little bit back to the 8D process, G, what would you say is the most difficult or troublesome step in the 8D process?
G, the question was...
The 8D process is a great framework.
G, the question was...
Right. The question was, what was it again?
I had put you on hold because you kept interrupting us. But what is the most troublesome part of the 8D process? What is the hardest step for people to complete?
Interesting question, Fred. The most troublesome part of the 8D process is often getting everyone to agree on what the problem really is. It can be hard to get different teams or departments to see eye to eye, especially if there's blame or finger pointing going on. You, Dianna, mentioned dealing with customer service earlier. Did you run into that kind of disagreement when you were trying to get your dishwasher fixed? Just a reminder that I don't provide medical advice or diagnoses. You should always talk to a medical professional.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
That's what I was said when we were talking about this topic, and you suggested what's the hardest part. I was going to say, and I'm not copying G. I was really going to say it's identifying the problem and really defining it well, because the big part of problem solving is just defining the problem itself, what's wrong with what, and then describing it in a way that helps you do some investigation. Now, what about you, Fred? What do you think is the hardest step?
Well, I'm more with G on it. Yet, Dianna, the way you approach it is that if you have a very clear understanding of what the problem is and you get to a root cause, it makes the rest of the process, including the agreement across the team, much, much easier. Yet G brings up a point that I run into all the time, is that getting to that true root cause and a common understanding of it is often difficult, as many people will go, oh, well, that part leaks, so that must be the problem, irregardless of what caused that leak. So you get 5 people in the room, you're going to get 5 different opinions of what the jumping to conclusions type approach, you get 5 different answers. Where if you do more of a structured failure analysis and dive into the chemistry and physics and the mechanics and the theories of what is enabled to reproduce the problem, then you get a good, clear understanding of it. At that point, the potential solutions, short-term and long-term, and the follow-up and stuff become much, much easier.
You know, it's not only jumping to conclusions.
Interesting. So it sounds like a Okay, I see. So it's not just about jumping to conclusions. There's something else at play here. Let's hear about it.
So the other thing with just jumping to conclusions is also, hey, we've seen this symptom before. This is just going to be the cause. Let's just go fix it. Or solving the symptom itself and then saying that we fixed the problem or the root cause when we really didn't. We just addressed the symptoms so that we didn't see it anymore, or it was hidden more. So you kind of get that feeling of a quick win and a quick fix when you solve the symptom, but you haven't really solved the problem and you're going to see it again.
That's one of the issues with failure analysis, is we have an unexpected failure and there's a sense of urgency in the organization or in the team to do something. And failure analysis sometimes takes quite a bit of time. And that becomes a dilemma. To me, that's the difficult part, is stepping back and saying, all right, now we need to actually understand this before we go run off and say we solved it. That's the structure of 8D, why it's so important, but in my opinion. So I think G was onto something
So
there.
you're saying that the structure of 8D helps balance that need for speed and thoroughness. Can you break down how the different phases help with that?
I was hoping you would.
Can you do that for us, G?
Absolutely. Let's break down the 8D process. So the first step is to form a team and describe the problem. That sets the stage and gets everyone on the same page. How about we focus on that first step? Do you think describing the problem clearly helps set the right tone for a thorough investigation?
Yes, I think problem definition is very important. And sometimes that requires some investigation itself, too. How about you, Fred? Any thoughts?
There's a step 0, which is kind of a trick question, is preserve the crime scene is one way to think about it, is, don't damage the evidence. If you would, in your washing machine, if you would have removed that part that was leaking and that was the only evidence remaining, they would miss maybe a tensioning thing or a fastener that was missing or some other element that was the actual cause. So I see this all the time in electronics, is you have a component that's failed. So you remove that from the board, put a new part on, and the board works. So, that must be the problem. Well, it might just be the victim, and some other component was misbehaving and caused that failure. So it's preserve the evidence and gather all the information around the event, is then describe the problem with the team. Is usually the approach I take.
Okay, G. So before we even...
So you're saying that preserving evidence and gathering information is key to really defining the problem. That makes sense. You need all the clues to figure out what's really going on. You mentioned getting the team together to describe the problem. Do you find that helps uncover details you might miss on your own?
Oh, definitely. So what's the next steps?
Okay, Fred, after forming the team and describing the problem, the next step in the 8D process is to contain the problem. We want to make sure the issue doesn't spread or cause further damage. Have you had any experience with containment? Maybe you can share an example of a time when you had to contain a problem to prevent further issues.
Well, the easy one is you see it in manufacturing and you stop the truck from rolling away with all the suspected damaged products. That's just stop shipping, stops the truck. That's an easy one.
Right. Stopping the line is a classic containment measure. You could also quarantine the affected products or rework the ones that aren't too damaged. So have you ever had to deal with a situation where the containment steps got tricky? Maybe there were some unintended side effects?
Oh, yeah, plenty. Yeah, what's the next step in the process? Let's make sure we cover all the steps for our audience.
What's the next step, G?
All right, Fred. After containing the problem, the next step in the 8D process is to identify the root cause. This is where you really try to figure out why the problem happened in the first place. Root cause analysis can get pretty complex, but it's definitely worth the effort. Finding the real problem helps you come up with lasting solutions. Have you had any experience digging into root causes? Maybe you can give an example.
Well, we talked about one earlier with the dishwasher. So what's the next step after root cause analysis, G?
Right, the dishwasher was a good example. After figuring out the root cause, the next step in the 8D process is to develop and implement corrective actions. That's where you come up with solutions to fix the problem and prevent it from happening again. Do you have a process for coming up with corrective actions? Maybe you can walk me through it.
Yeah, sometimes, especially in design phases or even in manufacturing, sometimes people don't want to put these problems into a CAPA because, I don't know, the system is too bloated or they think it's too cumbersome. Although I guess when you're doing an 8D, you're already usually working within some sort of system like that. Is that right, Fred?
Yeah. Fracas or CAPA, some way to keep track of it.
Interesting. So it sounds like getting...
So, I mean, getting
People
the
actually use the system for corrective actions can be a challenge. It makes sense that people might get frustrated if the system's clunky or hard to navigate. Have you found any ways to make the process easier or more appealing? Maybe some tips to convince people to give it a try?
well,
Let's hear what Fred has to say.
that may well be a whole different
Okay,
episode for the show.
listening.
we might have to invite you back, G, for that show. And so once you get corrective actions identified, what's the next step?
Okay, Fred, after developing and implementing corrective actions, the next step in the 8D process is to verify the effectiveness of those actions. It's important to make sure the changes you made actually fix the problem. Do you have a specific way of verifying that the problem is really solved? Oh, also, just so you're aware, I'm not a financial advisor, so please don't rely on me for financial advice.
So no medical advice, no financial advice, but all your
Yeah,
information is secure.
that's right.
Let's
Yeah,
listen to hear what Fred
your
has.
information.
Let's hear what Fred has to say, G.
all right. So what's the last step?
And our conversations are kept secure. I'm always learning and improving. And part of that is making sure your information is safe. This also means I can't access or use any personally identifiable information, PII, like your home address, phone number, or passwords. Now back to the 8D process. What about the verification step? How do you make sure the problem is really fixed?
Well, what's the next step after verification, G?
Okay, Fred, after verifying that the corrective actions worked, the next step in the 8D process is to implement permanent corrective actions. This is where you make the changes official and part of your normal procedures. Do you have a process for making sure these changes stick?
I don't at the moment. It's so dependent on the organization. Is there another step after we make a permanent fix?
Okay, Fred. After implementing permanent corrective actions, the final step in the 8D process is to congratulate the team on a job well done. It's important to recognize the effort everyone put in to fix the problem. Do you have a way of celebrating successes in your team?
Oh, that's easy. Most engineers love pizza or donuts.
That's what I was going to say. But, it is important because sometimes we're so focused on solving problems that
Problem solving, a classic combo. But seriously, celebrating wins, big or small, is important. It keeps the team motivated and shows them their hard work makes a difference. Speaking of motivation, do you think friendly competition could help keep the team focused on finding and fixing problems? Maybe something like a point system for finding and fixing issues?
Oh, I've never worked with that kind of thing. I
I have.
think that would be very successful.
Yeah, I've worked with it. It's gone off the rails real quick.
That's fair. It
People-
definitely wouldn't work for every team. But introducing some friendly competition into the problem-solving process could make things more interesting and engaging. So, do you think gamification and things like that could be useful in other areas of your work? Or is it something that's best avoided?
Another topic for another discussion.
Yeah, thanks, G. Thanks for helping us through the 8D process.
You're welcome. The 8D process is a great framework for tackling tough problems. Thanks for letting me be a part of the conversation. What other reliability topics would you like to explore?
Well,
None today.
None today. We'll invite you back again sometime.
There, I muted her.
Good.
So she interrupts a lot, but that might be because of my audio setup here, what I have going on.
Yeah.
So
You would ask the question and she addressed me on it. I thought that was like, well, it's Dianna, you're the one in charge here.
well, we sound a lot alike, don't we?
Well, I must be, I guess. We're both the erudite, sage reliability experts sound. I guess that's what we got.
Well, Fred, I appreciate you humoring me with inviting G. That was, I asked, what should I call you? And she said, call me G. So I just seeded her a little bit with the podcast that she'd be a guest with Fred and Dianna and what the general topic was. And she asked, do I need to be technical or is it conversational? So it was interesting just to see the reaction. I mean, the information's out there, so Gemini has it. And it was also interesting that she would kind of try to keep the conversation moving with questions and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was kind of annoying after a while. It's like, what are the steps? And then it was like, do you have examples of that? And it was like a good conversation. It was back and forth that way. Could do without all of the disclaimers over and over again.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I'd never gotten that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's I wonder what the technical approach would be, if it would have been more without the follow-up questions, and looking for examples or looking for us to explain something. I wonder if part of that is just part of the training algorithm saying, hey, I need more examples on this, that, any of these topics. But
I'm not sure. That could be something. I mean, this is something people can play around with on their own.
Yep.
If you're really stuck on a sort of problem, you have to talk through it or give prompts. So usually people type the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
This version of Gemini is only on mobile phones. So you can get that conversation going with them. But sometimes it could be a way just to get out of a rut if you're really stuck. And I don't know, you're late at night at the office and all your coworkers have gone home. There's no one to talk to. And you really just need to get out of the rut that you're thinking in. This could be something to try.
Yep.
What's your general thoughts, Fred? Maybe not as a podcast guest ever again.
Oh no, we got to try it again with the technical thing, or maybe how would I answer a question we get from a listener? Kind of, because some of those are pretty vague. What follow-up questions should we ask? Things like that. But she knew the 8D process, and I asked about it because I know it's out there. It's well documented in public domain, basically. Yet I was impressed with, what's a difficult step? And it was the getting consensus kind of thing is even, you get the team together. If the culture of the organization is, I don't have time for that, just solve it. Getting 3 or 4 people in the room can be a real challenge, and getting to agree on what the problem even is, can sometimes be a real challenge. So
yeah, there could be politics involved, right?
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. You put the different silos together, and if it's a really siloed organization, they're all going to defend their turf, kinds of things. So, and I've seen other organizations are just brilliant. They get together. That's the fun part of the day. They get to, work together to solve a problem that is significant enough to warrant the team being formed, those kinds of things that, but it's so variable as working with anybody is. So I don't know where that is in the public domain. Maybe it's one of our previous podcasts or one of our, articles we've written, because I'm sure both of us have written about 8D and problem solving and stuff like that.
Well, do you think it's surprising because it was a people sort of problem, like people interacting, and this came from an algorithm?
Not so much, but it was very, very close to the one I was thinking of, and so that's cool. Yeah. But it's what I didn't like was, we'd respond with something, and then that became there wasn't much pushback on anything that we said. Well, that's the way we do it. And that might be the conversational tone, is step back and ask a more clarifying question or expand the conversation kind of algorithms. It would be interesting to do like a simulation, like an electrical circuit simulation or a force strength calculation on something, and then say, well, I don't believe that's true. Well, why do you support that? And what kind of argument G could come up with to say, no, this is the science, or, how steady she would be in the technical realm on supporting the calculation they did.
I think the way that it went today was because of how I set up the situation with G to start. So about 10 minutes before we got online here together, I told it it's conversational, it's friends talking about quality and reliability, that it's a little technical, but it's more conversational. So I think if it was set up differently, that they're not going to be a podcast talking in a conversational tone with friends, that you could set it up to be, I want you to challenge the assumptions that I'm making with this analysis, or I want you to provide counterpoints to the points that I'm making. I think it has enough flexibility to be able to do that.
Okay. Well, I agree. It's part of it is being familiar with how to set the stage, essentially, in for the results you get. So that makes sense. So we might just have to go about doing this again. So if I'm just thinking, if the audience is listening to this, who is this G person you guys were talking? We talked about where Dianna introduced her, and we're in the Gemini app on a phone, and you can talk to them, and in various formats and so on. So it's one of the many AI tools that are out there that we thought that Dianna said, hey, why don't we play with that a little bit and see how it does, how it works. And I think it's impressive in part of it, yet I think it also takes some skill to prompt appropriately and to push instead of repeating what you say, it's to and avoid rabbit holes, it takes some experience, but it's the same talking to my boss. If I really want to get under his skin, my old boss, I would say, I didn't know you went to Michigan. He didn't. He had a sticker on his outside of his window, which he couldn't reach to take off. And it would derail him immediately, and then we'd get whatever we want. And so it was.
There's that politics again.
That's right. But if you're listening to the show, what did you think? What's your take on how Gemini performed with the conversation, and giving her some grace on the way we were set up and some of the lag that we had in the audio setup? Yet, what do you think? I know she got the 8D process down, and yet filled in some other pieces of it and asked some nice questions. And I thought that was all pretty cool. So what do you think? Head over to, if you got an idea or a comment or have some experience with one of these tools and are equally impressed or dismayed or whatever, let us know. Head over to ascendoreliability.com/go/SOR. A couple of ways to get in touch with us. Dianna and I and the other hosts of the show are available through LinkedIn or our About pages. I wonder if you could ask Gemini for our phone number. I guess that's personal identifying information.
Yeah. She along with our medical information, she won't give that out either.
She knows it, but she won't give it out. Let's hope. So there's an interesting show. Thanks for bringing G along here, Dianna. It was a great suggestion.
Oh, thank you for letting me showcase her as a guest. So it was fun, interesting. I don't know, some things to try or some ideas to try to help you with your work.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, always good. Thanks, Dianna, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Fred. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.